Well, our next guest today really doesn't need an introduction. He's been thinking about the U.S.'s role in the world and the importance of U.S. global leadership, first as a business leader, then head of the Winter Olympics in 2002, as a governor, as a presidential candidate, and now as Utah's senator. Mitt Romney has been a leader for a lifetime in all the issues that we're discussing today, and we couldn't be more honored that he's agreed to join us today. Senator, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Neil. Good to be with you.
So I just want to jump right in. We're talking about U.S. global leadership. This is a topic, as I mentioned, that you spend a lot of time thinking about. Tell us what your view is of the status of U.S. leadership in the world today. How should we be thinking about it as we try to bring this global pandemic to an end? And what should it look like in a post-pandemic world?
Well, I think it's fair to say that post-pandemic, we have a bit of an opportunity. I say that because we've been on a long slide. Our leadership role is increasingly less and less important to the world. And that's not just because of our own decisions. It's also because China is aggressively asserting its path to leadership, and they are rising even as we have been trending in the other direction. Although what's happened with COVID has made a number of countries aware that the U.S. really is the nation to depend upon, and that if we want to play a role as a leader in the world, I think we'll be welcome to do so. China's rise is the result really of their economic resources, and those are resources which have built in part through predatory practices, particularly subsidized or predatory pricing, which allows them to put Western businesses out of business, other nations, likewise Eastern businesses out of business, and replace them with their own to also get monopolies on certain raw materials. These practices have added to the extraordinary resources they have. And then, of course, their strength is added by their Belt and Road investment, over $1 trillion in investments around the world to seize key raw materials as well as have access to markets. They've also established ports in the key choke points globally for trade, and then they've made investments in countries throughout the developing world. All these things have come to bring fruit to them. At the same time, we've been speaking about America first, withdrawing from international associations, and gone after some of our allies with pretty tough language. And so what you're seeing is a stronger China, a weaker U.S. We're still stronger than they, but the trajectory is not a good one. And as you know, we've seen some 14 years where authoritarian regimes are rising, democracies are declining. So all these things are very threatening, but the opportunity presented by China's mismanagement of COVID is one which I hope we take advantage of.
So Sarah, I want to ask you to drill down a little bit deeper on both those points, and if you can, to maybe break it into two components. You just mentioned U.S. global leadership and America first versus engagement with our allies, and that calls for a strategy internationally, and I hope you'll opine a little bit on that. But there's also a lot of focus on what we might want to do domestically in the United States to be competitive. Can you give us your thoughts both on international engagement and what, if anything, we ought to be doing on the domestic side of the house in kind of this great competition?
Well, I'd start with our deciding what it is we want to be. And a friend of mine said, "What is our national ambition?" I know what China's national ambition is. It is by 2049 to have the most powerful military in the world, to have the leading economy of the world, and to be the geopolitical leader of the world, meaning to establish the practices and the bases upon which competition occurs globally. So that's their ambition. What is our ambition? What do we want to do over the coming decades? And as you know, prevent defense is not a great way to win a football game. It's not a great way to lead the world. So one is to establish very clearly what our ambition is. Number two, as you indicated, is to develop a very comprehensive strategy to achieve our ambition. We have not done that. We make tactical moves, but China has a strategy which they're pursuing very effectively. We don't. And so we need to bring some of our best thinkers, some from the public sector, some from the private sector, to say, what are our options here? How do we really make sure that we retain leadership in the world, and that liberal democracy and freedom is on the ascendancy, not in the decline. And I would, I'd note that we obviously have enormous advantages going for us, but there are things we're going to have to do if we want to maintain the leadership that we have. One is we got to link arms with our allies. We can't be fighting with Mexico and China and the EU and South Korea and Japan. We've got to come together and say we collectively are going to have to make sure that China understands what the rules of the road are, and that they cannot continue to exact their predatory behavior upon us, or they won't have access to our market. So that's number one. Number two, we have to lead the world in technology. We're a small country, all right, compared to China. They have 4 times our population. By definition, they will have a bigger economy than ours at some point, a lot bigger. And so how do we stay ahead? By having superior technology. And again, by linking arms with our friends and allies around the world in technology and in industry and in the military might that we would be able to amass together. So in terms of technology, yeah, we need to invest more in basic science in our country. Government should play a role in that and encourage businesses to do so through tax policy. I also think we'd be smart to say, look, if you graduated anywhere in the world in a key STEM subject that's important to us, we're going to let you come to our country and live here permanently. We'll give you a green card, whatever the status is. We want you to come here. This has always been the place people have wanted to come. And we ought to bring in the best and brightest that the world has to offer to keep us ahead from a technology standpoint. I would note that if we pass tax laws that make us a high tax nation, they won't want to come here. If we pass laws that say we're going to put huge capital gains taxes on inventors and innovators, they're not going to come to this country. They'll go somewhere else, which would be an extraordinary weakness that we would apply to our future. I'd also think that it's important that we market ourselves much better than we have. I'll end on that point. But we talk once upon a time about Radio Free Europe. Well, Radio Free Europe was probably a significant contributor to our interests when people used to listen to the radio. But we need to become far more effective in promoting freedom and our values around the world than we have been. China establishes TV stations in various nations around the world and then provides the content for the TV station. And we're asleep at the switch. So we need a strategy, and that'll help get us started.
Senator, when we think back to past foreign policy challenges that we faced as a nation, notably with the former Soviet Union, one of the hallmarks of the U.S. approach was that while each different president, including from different parties, had their own take on it, there was a kind of a common element that crossed administrations and kind of crossed parties. Do you think that's important as we think about our relationship and addressing the challenges that you just identified with China? And what do you think the prospects are for some type of bipartisan consensus, at least in the main, about the strategy that the U.S. should employ?
The good news is, I think there is the potential for that. Look, you're right. Ever since the Second World War, I mean, Harry Truman and Dean Acheson came together. Acheson wrote a book called Present at the Creation. They devised America's, if you will, foreign policy vision, which was, we are going to be the leader of the world. We are going to link arms with our friends around the world. We're going to promote our values around the world. And we do these things not just because we care about the rest of the world, but we care about ourselves. We do these because it's in our interest to be involved in the world. Because when we're not involved in the world, bad things happen that hurt Americans and that suck us into them. So, we're going to be involved in the world. I think there's a recognition on both sides of the aisle that that's important today. I think there is a recognition as of the last couple of years that China really does present an extraordinary threat to America and to liberal democracy generally, that we've been asleep at the switch, and that we're going to have to be far more aggressive in combining with our allies to make sure they understand what the rules are going to be. And if they don't live by those rules, that they don't get access to our markets. Those are things we're going to have to do. And I think there's a recognition that that's where we're headed. I'm pleased on the Foreign Relations Committee that Chairman Menendez and Ranking Member Risch really do see this eye to eye. They worked out a piece of legislation to push back on China. It's a good bill. I think it will pass. We're more together on this issue, I think, than certainly we were just 2 or 4 years ago.
Well, that is good news. In the few minutes we have remaining, I want to switch gears. In addition to your services ranking member that covers East Asia policy on the Foreign Affairs Committee, it also deals with cybersecurity policy. And the ransomware attack on the Capitol pipeline obviously got a lot of attention domestically in the last couple of weeks. But it's actually something that businesses of all sizes and in all industries in the United States deal with on a daily basis. What more should the U.S. government be doing today that it's not doing to confront these international criminal gangs who are targeting American businesses?
Well, the reality is that in many cases, in fact, in the great majority of successful hacking cases, it was not that the hackers had these extraordinarily brilliant people that were able to get by the most modern technology and techniques for protecting our systems. Instead, it's that our systems did not have the kind of cyber hygiene they should have had. And that's true in government, it's true in the private sector. About 85% of the successful attacks are as a result of enterprises not having the kind of up-to-date technology to protect their systems that they ought to have. And obviously there are companies that are expert in bringing people up to speed, but some of the most basic technology traits that we normally associate with protecting our systems are just not applied by many enterprises in government and throughout the country. That's about 85%. 15% are really difficult areas to protect. And if we can get people to use the most modern techniques on the 85%, why then our specialists will be able to do a better job protecting us against the 15% that are really tough. And I would note here, banks that had a long history of protecting data, I mean, they know the importance of security and privacy. They haven't been subject to the kinds of successful attacks you've seen in government and throughout the rest of our economic systems. And so we need to learn from them. As I look at what the government can do, CISA, which is really the home for this in the Department of Homeland Security, I think has to do a better job of collecting best demonstrated practices throughout industry and throughout government and promulgating them, making them available to businesses around the country, around the world for that matter. We can be a clearinghouse for not only where the attacks are occurring, but some of the available techniques we have to prevent those attacks from being successful. So I see CISA stepping up its game in terms of being a clearinghouse for best ideas, both for government and for the private sector.
Well, Senator, there's a lot more we could cover today, but that call for public-private partnership in confronting the challenges of cybersecurity is a great place to leave it on, because there's a lot of work to be done. On behalf of the U.S. Chamber and our audience gathered around the world, I can't thank you enough for taking a few minutes out of a busy schedule to spend with us today. Thank you, and let us know how we can help you in any of these endeavors.
Thank you so much. Keep on working hard. Get this economy going again, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.